Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Hippolyte. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the CollegeBound Foundation. Thank you for joining us today for it's our last session of our career speaker series. And today we're going to focus on a career in education, and we're going to hear about the education field, different options, how these gentlemen got to where they are in education. I'm going to introduce you first, though, to our co-host. Her name is Antoinette. I'm going to give her a second to introduce herself, actually.
Hi, my name is Antoinette. I am an intern at CollegeBound. I'm working with the CollegeBound's College Completion Program, and I am still a student at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'll be your co-host for today.
Awesome. Thank you. And just so you guys know, I am having some internet issues. So if I cut out, Antoinette's going to pick up and we're going to keep rolling. Without further ado, because I know you guys didn't come here to hear me speak, I'll allow our guests to introduce themselves, and I'll start in the order that I see on my screen with Mr. Rudy Ruiz.
Well, thanks so much, Melissa and Antoinette. Great to be in community with you all this afternoon. I am here in the area, of course, Baltimore, and we're coming up, my family and I, on our decade mark here in Maryland. So I started my education career back in my hometown of Milwaukee, serving Milwaukee Public Schools. And so I was not actually an education major as a college student. I had the opportunity to do my undergrad, as they say, out at Stanford University. And so wonderful experience out there. I kind of pretend I'm still there with this virtual background. But I studied linguistics, so language and how it's used, especially in society, so sociolinguistics. And so being a young and naive at the time, I had what at the time was a really cool job. So this was in the year 2000. And so I was working for what they called the .com at the time, and doing that, realized, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm actually emailing my work from my MacBook, my funky little MacBook. And even though the company is based in California, it's very expensive in California, and my whole family, 51st cousins, is back in Milwaukee. Let me just go home to Milwaukee where cost of living is lower, and I can just email this work to California and nobody will know the difference. And so I was working from home 24 years ago. It's working out pretty cool. And then after a year, they said, oh, great job on that 1-year contract. Good luck with whatever you want to do next. I said, oh, that's how that works. So I found myself in Milwaukee, and I had done some serving as a teaching assistant back at Stanford. And I'd always just had a natural draw toward helping others learn. And so I went over to Milwaukee Public Schools, where I had a great especially middle school experience, and got recruited to start teaching and just fell in love with it. So it's now, about 23 years in the education field. And so glad to talk this afternoon once folks have a chance to introduce themselves and we get our turns to tell you more about what those different endeavors have included. But wonderful to be here with you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Rudy. Robert Stevens, I have you next.
Thank you. And good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you all, the CollegeBound Foundation, Ms. Hippolyte, as well as Antoinette. Very happy to be here. Again, my name is Robert Stevens. I'm a middle school principal in Henrico County, Virginia, which is located right outside of Richmond, Cleocassa Middle School. And similar to Mr. Ruiz, I've been in here for about 20 years. So 20-year education. I started out teaching business and marketing. That was my major undergrad. I went to Old Dominion University, majoring in business administration. I went back to school a couple of times. I was one of those guys really trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. So it's going back and forth from business to education. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got into education in a little bit. But, like I said, I've been doing this for a while now. Ended up last at the University of Richmond with a degree, a postmaster's degree in educational leadership and policy studies. From business and marketing, I became a admin intern and worked my way up to principal. I've done all types of things along the way, teaching at VCU as an adjunct, contributing to a book as far as talking about my experiences as an assistant principal, next in line to lead, and then also as an entrepreneur as far as my day job, I really love working with kids. I really like helping young people and people kind of like myself who was a first time college student as far as my family. So helping people along the way pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make a way out of no way, so to speak. So rambling right now, but happy to be here. Thank you again.
And he DJs. I'm gonna add that there. Teachers have lives too, y'all. Um, for our next person, Christopher Vick, you're up.
Man, it's so great to see y'all. So there's a dope book I just read. It says MC means move the class. And what they talk about is that the skills of a DJ, you got to be a great listener. You got to feel the vibe. You're always being really thoughtful, but you can't predict what's going to happen. That DJing is in a lot of ways very similar to being a great teacher, because in my view, they're both artists. Brother, man, I'm so sad I don't have an R name, so y'all got to pretend that I'm part of this community. But y'all, it's great to see you. Dr. Christopher Vick. I'm an associate director of the Sherman STEM Teacher Scholars Program here at the University of Maryland at Baltimore County. You can tell by my accent, I am a proud product of Baltimore City Public Schools. So I always tell folks I've made 5 miles of geographic progress in my life growing up in Baltimore City, going to schools. And it's interesting, like Brother Rudy, like Brother Robert, I went to college with no anticipation of being a teacher. I said, if there's anything I will never do, it's going to be this teaching thing. One of the things I always tell folks is that school and education are 2 very different things. I love education and I absolutely hate school, always have and probably always will. And because of that view, I come into this higher ed space always thinking about including those marginalized learners who don't think about themselves having access to these spaces. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'll go really quickly. Again, grew up in Baltimore City. I was a mid-range to black student, right? And I happened to have done well in the SAT because my school offered a free course, and that free course changed the course of my life and taught me that systems and structures are what we need rather than one-off things if we're going to empower our kids. I had the privilege of attending Morehouse College on a scholarship. From there, I went to Simmons University in Boston and took my doctorate at Boston College. I survived Boston. I did a 16-year bid, I say. Now, the benefit is I was enabled to meet my wife, and I'm very thankful for that. We started our family in Boston, but y'all ain't nowhere in the hell I'm ever going back up there. And if you don't know, I'm a hardcore Ravens fan, and I'm still in mourning for our loss at the end of last season. So, y'all, it is wonderful to be with you. I've done so many different jobs. I've been a high school teacher. I initially certified as a 4th grade teacher. I did student teaching, and I was the dirt-ass worst teacher who ever lived. Started in high school, loved it forever, and then got to college. I'm like, I'm not doing anything else but this for the rest of my life. So I am so excited. I'm humbled. I'm thankful to be in this space and plugged in. I'm just pumped to learn with everybody else, y'all. Thank you, Ms. Hippolyte, for having me in the space. Thank you so much, Antoinette, for allowing us to be in the space as well.
Okay, so I've known Rudy for some years. I've known Robert for some years. Christopher, you are hilarious. So from what I'm seeing here, this is going to be a good conversation. Yes, we have questions. Yes, we're going to answer questions. Yes, we're going to give information, but you're also going to talk from yourself and just be yourself, because that's what kids relate to. Kids, students. I say kids because I work in the school, but students, young people. Granted, this webinar, we always focus on, we say college students, right? But there may be some high school students watching and some adult learners who are thinking about changing careers. So we're going to kind of focus with all of them in mind and just share the information. And what I'm hearing from all of you is that nobody sat down and said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a teacher. When I grow up, I'm going to be a principal. When I grow up, I'm going to work and I'm going to help people get into education, or none of this stuff. You all were thinking different things. So who wants to start off? Because I know all of you kind of touched on it, but kind of talk about where you are now and how you got into the career.
I'll jump back if that's okay. Oh, Brother Albert, you can go ahead if you want.
Sure, thank you. So I always like to preface this comment. And Chris, thank you. You are hilarious. Thank you for breaking the ice for the room and allowing us to kind of let our hair down. But
wait, y'all, I ain't gonna say nothing about y'all.
I always like to preface this comment by saying I just want to DJ. That's all I wanted to do. I never knew I was going to college. It wasn't really forced in my house. Like leaving high school, like I said, first one in my family to attend a 2 or 4 year institution. So when I got there, I was like, this is amazing. I went to school in Norfolk, Virginia, comprised of 7 cities. So in 7 cities, you can find something to do. Always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, get into business, and I'm still, kind of in that space. But when I graduated college, I thought I was the man as far as DJing. I had some things working out, and I actually moved from Norfolk to Richmond because it was a more centralized location. So I can get up 95 pretty quickly, get across 64 pretty quickly. And when I moved to the area, I met a lady at church, and she was asking me, um, so now that you're moving up here, what are you going to do for a living? Like, what are you going to do for work? And my answer was, I don't know. I'm just thinking about DJing. I was making a pretty decent living and moving into my aunt's house that she was allowing me to rent out and fix up for $200 a month. So who could beat that? But with that being said, I found out a week later when she set up the interview that she worked in HR for the Department of Correctional Education. So with that, I was able to start a job 2 weeks later as an instructional assistant, kind of working as a substitute at the different juvenile correctional centers in the Richmond area. Did that for about 4 months, and a position opened up as a marketing teacher. And I've always liked working with people, and kind of like you were saying, Chris, a lot of teaching is really just entertaining. So two things I like: entertaining, talking about business and marketing, and I had the nights and weekends free. So what better thing could you do? So I did that for about 4 years, and I started to like it and get better at it. And then I transitioned to public school where I was teaching business. Again, going back to church, I'm seeing a lot of things happen from church. By this time, I was married. Then my wife was like, he really doesn't like his job. And I think she just wanted me to have a job where I could have my cell phone during the day as far as not working in the jail. So switched to one of the public high schools in the area. And a few years later, I was in the process of interviewing for a job I didn't get, but my name was passed on for another position. She was like, hey, you really should meet this guy. And I always like to say her name, Dr. Omega Wilson, who was the director of secondary schools in Henrico County. She sat me down and was like, hey, I was giving your name. I heard you would be good as far as some leadership roles. Tell me what your plans are for the future. So naive me said, hey, I want to be a superintendent one day. She was like, well, you can't be a superintendent without being a principal. So I gave her a few examples, but she was talking to me really about being strategic with my leadership and my growth. And, I gave her a few examples, and she was like, well, it's not common. So she set me up to be an admin aide. I was like, I really don't want to do this. It's like, all right, whatever, I'll try it out. I did it for a year and a half. I loved it. Year and a half later, I was working as an intern. 6 months after that, I was working as an assistant principal. 3 years after that, I was associate principal. And 2 years after that, here I am as principal. So there was some setbacks along the way. There's a quick growth once I really set my mind to where I wanted to be and had that guidance. So a lot of things about coaching and really steering people and talking about your dreams. But that's generally how I got here. There's a lot of professional learning along the way, a lot of school, but really that focus and intentionality is how I went from being a DJ to a classroom teacher to administrator. And I used to say I was a DJ who teaches, and then I switched from being a teacher who DJs, and now I'm a principal who DJs occasionally for relief. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I've known you for some time, and some of those things I didn't even know. That's awesome. Rudy, I think you're up next. How'd you?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, a few connecting points, and I don't want to forget to mention that in case Robert, maybe you may not be familiar, but one of Dr. Vick's colleagues, Corey Carter, he actually is a great illustration of what we're talking about, the fact that not only can you wear multiple hats, not only can you be in education and entrepreneurship, but you also can be a DJ and be an educator. So he goes by Mr. Carter Teach. And last year, he released a hip hop ed album. So I'm a big fan and a big friend. So yep, definitely got to check that out. We could use that for some opening intro music here. But I want to connect a couple points as well. Melissa mentioned the fact that we kind of stumbled into the education space. And Dr. Vic mentioned this earlier, the fact that essentially, as one person has put it, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So unfortunately, it's not a coincidence that none of us were, recruited early to become educators, because if you look at the data, less than 2% of teachers nationally in the workforce are Black men in particular. And Latino educators as well are highly underrepresented, only 9% of the workforce compared to 27% of the students. And yet, oftentimes, when it comes to which students are hearing, oh, you would be a great teacher someday, and when they hear that, we know that the current teacher workforce looks the way it does because those students are hearing that from a young age. So we do want to, be here, show up this afternoon, and encourage Cameron and any other, young person who is considering education to consider it. The only way that, we are going to get to make sure that every young person can see themselves in the classroom and in the school is if there is, proactive outreach. And so I think all of us in our own ways are doing that work. I'm trying to link arms with a lot of different folks in the community and nationally and even globally. So we've got a brother as well here in Maryland who, like myself and like, our brothers here, is also an adjunct and is also an entrepreneur and is also an educator and is the founder of an organization called Real Men Teach. So his organization and one of my organizations, Edifying Teachers, as one of our strategic partnerships. But we want to make sure that young people, and especially underrepresented young people, get that encouragement, get that support to consider these options early. And so I'm glad that we're going to be talking about the fact that there are many different options, many different pathways within education this afternoon.
I'm gonna put a shameless plug in for my dear brother, Corey Carter. So if y'all get a chance, if you're on Spotify, check out the Progress Report. His artist name is Mr. Carter. Don't ask me to spell it. Favorite track is I Am Enough. That jump just gets you going. It's off chop. So I'll say this. I'm glad I'm going last because I am going to give you bad advice. So I am never going to be the person to ask about a career path, right? So I don't know what you believe in, and I don't know what I believe in, but there's a phrase that say, people make plans and God laughs. And that's how I've experienced my life. I've never been smart enough, good enough, or anything enough to figure out a glide path here, right? So here's what my North Stars have been through my whole life. Solve the problem that makes you angry, right? So as a teenage kid growing up, I was angry about a lot of stuff, injustices, and I was like, dang, I oftentimes felt powerless and didn't know the vehicle to do something about it, right? So teaching is my way, my revolutionary act of insurrection to say like, yo, these big systems and structures and all these ugly things that are out there, here's my way of making a difference, right? But the other half of the equation I'm really leaning into, and I'm thankful to get ministered to and get a word today, Brother Robert. You said something powerful. Is I'm also now in my entrepreneurial phase, right? So I got my own organization, A to Z College Consulting. We help kids of color get to college. We help districts put together more thoughtful college consulting practices, culturally competent college consulting practices. And I would not be able to do that if I didn't have the time that I have now. So here's the secret, y'all. I am so privileged to have been able to go to school and get a lot of formal education, probably more than anybody else in my family, right? And the other secret, y'all, I probably work the easiest. I'm in a nice, easy, climate-controlled office. My brother's outside doing much, much more intense work than I am, right? But all that to say, when my other touchstone has become solve the problem that people will pay you to solve, right? So think about what's the thing that's animating because it makes you angry. And then the other half of the equation is what is it that people will pay you to do or pay you to solve? And the third thing I've realized as I've gotten older, and you won't recognize this from this conversation, and I say this genuinely in all sincerity, I am a tremendous introvert. I am not a huge lover of people. This is enough people interaction. Once I get home, I'm like, yo, I'm in my cave, leave me be, right? But in a lot of ways, my career and my life has been hamstrung, right? Was hamstrung as a result. So one thing I've learned from a brother, entrepreneur brother, lived near me, he said, we are blessed by people. And I've really taken that word and been much more intentional about connecting with folks. Brother Rudy, you said about linking arms with folks. There's so many folks who are doing work that I'm doing. And there's, the phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And I've really been leaning into that element of my work of just connecting with people. And it's been fantastic. And we'll drop another secret because we're family, y'all. One of the college work is super dope and it's great and it's amazing and fantastic. There's this myth, there's this lie out there that education don't pay. That's a lie. That's a myth, right? Do they pay you what you're worth? No, but whoever can, right? But what we have is this thing called time, which you get with your family, which you get to pursue your other things, entrepreneurial, spiritual, whatever it is that animates you. And I have a balance of life, which I've never had before. And I get to solve the problems that make me angry. My organization works, we partner with Baltimore City, and we're tasked with finding and supporting new teachers for Baltimore City public schools. Like, I can't think of anything that's more aligned with my life and my purpose. And to be able to do that and pursue my entrepreneurial dreams and have time for my family life, can't beat it. And the only reason these doors have been open to me are two. One, because I have a stupid degree that means folks have to call me doctor, even though they look at me and might not respect me, but they have to. And two, I got people. You got those two things, you're good. You're good. And that's been my life testimony. So, last word I'll say is, again, it's great to have a plan. I don't. But minimally in the stead, until you get there, be really intentional about connecting with people and be thinking about the things that animate you and bring you to life.
What's the name of the program that you work with, Chris?
So at UMBC, we're the Sherman STEM Teacher Scholars Program. In fact, that's an old name. It's the Sherman Teacher Scholars Program. STEM is no longer part of our mission anymore. But it's Sherman Teacher Scholars Program here at UMBC. We're one of the 7 scholars programs on campus.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we were funded initially by George and Betsy Sherman. They just gave us a $21 million gift a couple of months ago, one of the largest in the history of UMBC. And our intention is to create and sustain a cohort of teachers that will serve in Baltimore City. So what do we do? Well, one, we give them scholarship money to help them get through college, right? Because I don't think you should be going into the classroom with student loan debt. That's just my philosophy. 2, they're going to have access to a bunch of classes that other folks don't have access to. So one, and I'll be teaching it this evening, is a class called Teaching With and in Baltimore Communities, where we talk to you about, like, what is it like teaching in Baltimore when Nut or Little Black or whoever your students are, and they say, like, yo, why do I have to know this? And if you don't have a culturally competent response that empowers your students, that gives them choice, you're done for the course of the year, right? And you also have to have context around why Baltimore shows up that it does. We don't want missionaries who've seen, what's that movie, Dangerous Minds or Lean on Me and all these other freedom writers on other movies, like, all right, I'm gonna go try teaching the poor Black and brown kids. Like, no, it's cultural competence, it's humility, and we do a lot of work around positionality. We meet monthly with our students just to create community, and we also have each semester our students have what's called an ALE, Applied Learning Experience, where they're in a Baltimore City classroom getting experience. From those different touchstones, we're able to kind of create community for our kids and empower them. And the last thing I'll say, and when I'm going long, please blink and tell me to shut the heck up. UMBC is a dope school, and like, we have the reputation of being a really STEM focused school, a real nerd campus, and we are. But like, ed majors can kind of sometimes feel, or ed minors can sometimes feel like they don't have a place or a home on our campus. So in that way, Sherman Scholars really fills a really important void for our folks who become teachers. Again, brother Rudy said it. Most teachers are white middle class women who like school. That's the preponderance of teachers. That ain't most folks in most classes, right? So we have to help our folks understand that demographically, the people in front of you, they're not you, and that's okay. Doesn't mean you can't become a teacher.
Now, I have 2 follow-up questions. Rob, I know you mentioned, one's for Rob, one's for Rudy. Rob, I know you mentioned, you said you did some type of internship that initially got you into teaching.
So the internship program, that's not what got me into teaching. That's what kind of propelled me into administration. And Henrico County has a position, and some school divisions call it a Dana students, but us, we call it an admin intern. So I like to say it's like an assistant principal, like where you are doing all the things of an assistant principal, but they give it to you in smaller doses. So as opposed to, supervising your science and your math courses, you may supervise something like electives or PE, something that's not tied to standardized testing. But you're able to get those supervision skills and own those while you're growing and get that feedback. So it's more a hand holding as you go through that position. But, as part of my endorsement or postmaster certificate from the University of Richmond, that has embedded hours as well. So embedded internship hours and experiences where you're doing all of those things to learn along the way. But as far as, going into teaching, I was a career switcher and I did a really alternative pathway. I didn't go through like these career switcher programs that's out there now. And I basically had to learn in the field. And it was like you were saying, Chris, when somebody comes at you sideways in the classroom, how do you respond? And naturally I work with people. I share so much of myself, and I wasn't the best student. Like I got suspended 7 times and probably in 13 fights in the third grade. So it's a joke in my family that I do the work that I do now. Like my mom was at the school so much. My brother just came home not too long ago. So it's like I'm the good one, but am I really that good based on, my upbringing? But one of the things that helped me and I think is so powerful is that I was always involved in stuff. And although neither one of my parents went to school, they were able to keep me close to projects and programs to keep me aligned. So when I was outward bound in high school and going to school on Saturdays, my friends were looking at me crazy, but those were the same organizations helping me with tutoring, providing scholarships, and making a way when there wasn't a way. So that's not to say college is the only way. I know we promote that, but I have some friends out of the neighborhood who went in the military. One of my friends sell cars, and now he's a public speaker. So there's multiple ways to get to the same pathway, which is basically taking care of your family and helping those that's coming along behind you. So answers your question a little bit more, but that's how
No,
the
this is good.
internship play out. But I guess really the real internship is the School of Hard Knocks.
And that's real. Um, Rudy, I know that you mentioned a couple programs while you were talking. You mentioned edifying, you mentioned another program. Say a little bit more about the programs that you're aligned with. Because I know when we got to you, you know you do a whole lot of things and you were real modest. So please tell me a little bit more about the programs and what you're touching on now.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So during my time teaching back in Milwaukee, growing up, I was a student athlete, as they say, and pretty much my whole life I've been involved with the sport of wrestling in one way or another. And so as a young professional, I wanted to be able to give back in that way as well to my community. So I was a high school coach, I was a college coach, I was a kids coach. And so when I came out here to Baltimore, I said, well, who are my people over here? And so even before I set foot in Baltimore, I was connected with Beat the Streets Baltimore. And so for the past several years, I've been the chairman of the board for Beat the Streets, which uses wrestling as a hook to help young people onto better life trajectories. And even last summer, our executive director, Lydell Henry, led a cultural exchange trip out to Africa with the young people from Baltimore and some of the coaches. So really powerful work. But what I've done in the past decade here is not only to lead the college and career readiness work for Baltimore City Schools when I first moved here, like I had done in Milwaukee as the first director of college and career readiness for Milwaukee Public Schools. But since that time, I've also had a chance to learn more about, go deeper on the career readiness side. And behind the scenes, what I was doing for most of this past decade is really looking into, I think it was Dr. Vic's point, or maybe Robert, or both, that notion of, what irritates you about what you've been experiencing personally and professionally. And so in academia, in higher ed, they call that a problem of practice. And so when you're wanting to continue your education, like I did when I moved here and applied to Johns Hopkins School of Ed, they said, what's the problem you've been experiencing as a professional that you want to learn more about, kind of become an expert on, and maybe contribute a little something to help improve the situation. And so when I thought about it, I said, well, I know a lot about the college and career readiness work. I'm not sure what my next move might be, like Robert was saying earlier. Maybe someday I want to be a superintendent, but what are some other aspects of education that I think are problematic that I want to address? And so my experience was like Robert's experience back in Milwaukee, where I said, man, here I am thinking I'm an ideal role model coming back to my neighborhood to teach, and they leave me hanging with no support. And mentorship was almost nothing. Somebody told me oh, don't have an inappropriate relationship with a student, don't hit a student, and we'll make sure you don't get fired. I'm like, that's mentorship? I don't think that's mentorship. And so, that kind of stuck with me. And so I said, well, I'm seeing teachers leaving, I'm seeing leaders leaving, and the technical term is attrition. So like, what's under that? Why is that happening? What can we do about it? And so for the past almost 10 years, I've been researching that and kind of becoming an expert on that, and basically said, you know what? Mentorship actually works. It's just that nobody came up with a way to make it work in people's real life, in a way that's meaningful to them with a mentor, that they can identify with, especially for us folks of color. And so the past few years, as I finished up my doctorate, coming up on 2 years now, I said, you know what? I don't want this just to be, a research paper, a dissertation, a book. I want this to make a difference. And so, in addition to the work I'm doing with communities to help with the college and career readiness, I've also been developing this new way of supporting teachers through this now international network of mentors of color. And so really excited that work is homegrown here in Baltimore. Corey is actually has been one of our edifiers, as I call them, because we're called edifying teachers. And so we have this really powerful network of mentors that provides ongoing mentorship to make sure that, especially teachers of color, you have the support that they need to stay and grow in the profession.
Wow. You guys are awesome.
And I just want to shout out, you mentioned it earlier, but I want to shout out Curtis as well with Real Men Teach. I had an opportunity to connect with him in Austin of South by Southwest. And the work that you guys are doing with Edify Teachers and Real Men Teach, you guys are doing a lot. And it's going nationwide now. The movement that you guys are doing is really going forward and far. So just wanted to plug that name in there. I know you mentioned it earlier and bring it full circle for you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Melissa, to put a personal touch on it too, it's funny because I've got 3 sons, which when I first moved here, the oldest was starting middle school. Now he's halfway through college himself. My second son is halfway through his first year, I guess, coming to the end of first year at College Park. And so, in talking with him on his most recent break, he said, Dad, I'm not sure about this major. I'm thinking about maybe some other options. What do you think about teaching? Does it pay? Can I raise a family on that? And I said, well, that's part of the struggle right now is there's all these old stories about the fact that you couldn't, earn much money. Here in Maryland, teaching actually pays quite well. And there's a lot of movement nationally, a lot of even federal legislation that we've endorsed that and state legislation here in Maryland where, I told them by the time you graduate, the minimum salary is going to be $60,000 a year. And Maryland's one of the states where you can earn $100,000 as a teacher. And there's just different possibilities there, not just in the classroom, but all of us are working in, spaces that are kind of adjacent to both the school and the classroom. We've mainly been talking about what we would call the public sector. Of course, CollegeBound is part of the nonprofit sector. And then with respect to these notions of entrepreneurship, there's also the private sector in terms of education companies. And so I've had lately, last several years, last decade, the chance to learn more about those other spaces. But I would encourage young people to know that, whatever you think is a need, you're right, and you can be part of that solution.
Can I throw in something really quick? So one, Brother Ruiz, sorry, I apologize. I should have been calling it doctor. Sorry, please. My apologies. So I transitioned to college. I was working in Southeast DC, this organization called College Track. And we were doing some dope work, supporting first generation kids on the way to college. And it was amazing. My schedule was awful. And I had this opportunity to transition to college. Yet here's the problem. We're families, we can talk about this because we don't talk about money enough, and I love money. It was a significant pay cut, right? And my wife and I had this conversation like, yo, we like nice stuff. And can we handle this pay cut? My dad said something that's elucidating and stays with me forever. He said, your salary or what someone has to pay you is what it takes to get you what someone has to pay you to do something is your compensation for a task you don't really want to do. And that really stuck with me. The more they got to pay you, generally that means there's more they got to pay you to do a task you're not really into. All that to say, I think it's important to frame the term compensation broadly, meaning, y'all, I'm into bread. I really am. I'm into having as much of it as possible. And I want you to think about the time you have with your family is compensation, right? Summers, vacations, whatever. The impact you make on community is part of your compensation. So the ability to say, yo, I made a difference. That folder full of cards, those like all those things are compensation. So I think we live in a culture which, and not necessarily a bad thing, which trades dollars for hours. And we kind of have that mindset frequently. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But as you're going into this work thing about being a knowledge worker, I would encourage you to think even more broadly about compensation and that it extends beyond just that one bottom line. That includes your time and the impact you get to have on young people. It's really, really critical as well.
So what will make a person successful in teaching so that way they can feel fulfilled and paid?
Productive rage. So James Baldwin says to be Black in America is to be in a perpetual state of rage, right? And if you're not angry about something, you're not paying attention, right? So as a teacher, it was my place to be able to say, yo, so I taught African American history for 14 years. I can come in and say, yo, not that anybody might have this opinion, but let's imagine someone's like, yo, this dude Donald Trump is out here wilding out. I'm making that up, right? To be able to come into a classroom space and say, let's have some conversations around like where white supremacy comes. And it was a balm in my spirit and my soul. And I appreciated that more than I can express. Being able to, and again, I taught high school, being able to see that, you know, my kids are going off to college and are that I cannot express how great that made me feel. And I know I can't take those feelings to the bank, but like it embiggened me as a human being, right? So I tend to bring kind of a subversive spirit, an us versus them. They don't want y'all to win, right? And my classroom teaching was my way of saying like, yo, we are making a stand for right, for good, and for just. And we're making a stand that you're going to be the first kid in your family to go to college. You're the first one to have a ton of money. Being able to have those kind of wins, you know, for kids that I've engaged with, you know, 5, 10, 15, even years ago, and they're still, you know, doing great things. I cannot tell you how much of a win that is for me.
I'm going to add on the fact that having teachers that you can identify with and that, you know, reflect your background is not just a nice to have. The research shows that students have a greater sense of belonging, a greater sense of support, greater academic outcomes, life outcomes, etc. And so one of the groups that we're connected with, I think the URL for you, Antoinette, is 1mtoc.org. It stands for 1 Million Teachers of Color. That's a national campaign about 2 years in. And what I point out to people is that 1 million teachers of color is not an arbitrary random number. Like we literally need 1 million teachers of color to have proportionality with our student population nationally. And so school districts are really trying to figure out how do we get more teachers of color in our schools, in our classrooms. And even legislatures, policymakers are trying to figure out how they can help. And so here locally in this region and in this state, et cetera, you know, every session, every season, there's new resources coming out, not only in terms of great programs like Sherman STEM Scholars Program, but even just in Baltimore County as an example, like in the last couple months, $1 million scholarship opportunity coming out this fall, you know, new program from Johns Hopkins where they're going to pay for your master's degree. And so they're basically saying, hey, we're going to give you money to go to college if you're willing to teach with us and for us for a couple of years. And so if you have an interest, the money is there as well. And so in terms of the, you know, some of the issues around college debt, that's a piece where, you know, there are resources, new resources available and more coming into play.
And, you know, I think that's why, you know, conversations like this and organizations like the ones you all represent are important because, you know, there've been programs like this forever, but we don't learn about them. We don't know about them. And you hear about, you know, people graduating from schools debt free or going into education. Like in Henrico County, we just had this teacher scholars program where they were going from school to school to school and basically giving students awards saying, hey, you know, congratulations, you have a job once you graduate college with Henrico County when you graduate with a 4-year degree. I actually hired one of those teachers. I hired her and she applied here without even using it as her background, but she would have been guaranteed a position, you know, without that conversation. She earned it. But we need to spread the word. Have these conversations with our young people. Like I said, the people in the room, we didn't know we were working in schools until after we graduated from college. And the opportunities are there. And it's one of those things where you also say the bigger the risk, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. So depending on the school you work with, the demographics or population of students you work with, that's what success is to me. I took a $10,000 pay cut when I left the Department of Correctional Education to work in public schools. I was working for the state. Um, Again, there were some other things that I looked at, but being an educator gives you a level of freedom and a level of flexibility that you can't get with other careers. Even with climbing the ranks and becoming a principal, that was the balance. Like I knew if I made it to like a certain income level, I can do less DJ, and I had that flexibility. And part of that came with being more intentional about my family as well. My oldest is in college, then I have a ninth grader and I have a sixth grader. So with my older son transitioning to school, I wanted to be intentional with the time that I'm spending with my younger kids, realizing, how fast that this time happens. Dad was on the road every weekend traveling. So now I want to make sure I'm there on Saturday mornings to take my son to lacrosse practice because that's what my parents did. My mom, she worked two jobs. She came home at 4:30, made dinner between 4:30 and 5:30, and at 5:30 she was heading back out the door to go to her second job. So thinking about these sacrifices that people made for us, these are the same type of sacrifices that we're doing. And even at these roles that we have now, it's all about opportunity, provide opportunities and making spaces for other people to achieve and succeed. So whether it's from hiring or whether it's from connecting somebody to another organization, whether they're teaching or going into another career, it's all about making these connections and provide opportunities. And I know if I provide opportunity to one person, guess what? I've changed this person's outcome and their family dynamics. So not only am I impacting my lineage, I'm impacting their lineage as well. And all of us are reaping the benefits of it all.
So if let's say there's a student watching this, right? And they're like, dang, I want to get like y'all. I want to get like you. What do you think attributes to your professional success? What would you guys say that?
I'm going to pick up off of what Robert just mentioned around, again, what the term I guess we would usually use is networking. And I think even Melissa, you had posed that question a few months ago. What would folks recommend to young people? And I said, get them on LinkedIn. And so, my tagline and one of the company's mantras is, rehumanizing education through the power of connection. And so, like when I connect with young people, especially, but people at any stage, to be honest with you, I've mentored people, at every age, 17 to 70. And so when I meet young people that are, let's say, for example, Tamir, I highlighted him, as a success story after he had graduated from Philadelphia, School District of Philadelphia. He was, I think, a college freshman. He said, well, one of my goals is I want to be a superintendent someday. I was like, you know what? I know a couple of Black superintendents. Let me introduce you right now. And so he's done some wonderful things. That's an example. But to me, it's like, you don't need to, you don't need to be a barrier. And just because you had a harder journey doesn't mean you can't connect, and doesn't mean we shouldn't be, especially as communities of color, we need to be acting as communities and making these connections and thinking and being multi-generational and modeling, what we talk about, walking the talk.
And can I piggyback on that? Networking is definitely key. And, asking a lot of questions when you're in the space, being a learner, being curious, and just being an outright good person. There are so many people who are watching our everyday move. And am I going to recommend or say good things about the kid that's a jerk when nobody's around? Or when we're speaking in confidence, I know your character. So if I'm bringing your name up in a room that you've never touched, guess what? It's going to reflect on me. So if I say, Chris, yeah, I had this conversation with Chris. You should really meet this guy. He was dropping some gems. Forty was dropping some gems on the call. You all should really touch base, and boom. It's a guy you never known, you never met, but here I am connecting him with someone else. Like you mentioned Curtis. I met Curtis by chance in Texas, but here it is coming around full circle. And you can have this one, one conversation or this one meeting, this one opportunity where you don't connect or you miss a moment or you treat somebody terribly. And then it circles back around. It's like, oh, wow, that guy's a jerk. I'll never work with him again. And I met some famous people like that. I met some colleagues like that. And along the way, and people remember these things. But if you're just a genuine person and you're doing what's right on a day-to-day basis, people are going to remember those things and they're going to try to help you. And it's in our nature that we really want to help people. So again, networking, talking to people, being curious. I like to say just be a sponge, soak up everything, But yeah, just networking, learning, and being a sponge.
Yeah, this is great for me. So I'm enjoying this. Shoot, everybody else is getting a benefit. That's an extra treat. Small thing I'm recognizing. As a young person, I thought networking was like a dirty word almost, right? I thought networking was for like, if you can't do it, then you have to have people who can say you can do it, right? And I didn't recognize that networking isn't a substitute for ability. It's what you need to do to get in the door. Just having talent really don't mean nothing. It means nothing. And I wasted a lot of time thinking just being smart or whatever is going to mean something. It's having that connection that opens the door. And I will add that transactional relationships are okay. There are some people that come into my life, and our role is I'm only going to give to them. And I ain't going to have no beef with it because there are certain people in my life that have allowed me to coast and they just give to me. They just feed me, right? So it's kind of like a wheel. You put it out there, you spin around and hope it comes back. And that's just how life is. That's how I view networking. So don't be afraid if it feels transactional. One. Two, I have a long memory and a short memory, meaning I have a long memory for the dumb stuff I did and a real short memory for the dumb stuff kids do. So when kids do dumb stuff in the classroom, I'm like, oh, that ain't nothing because I was up here determined to destroy my whole life. So anytime I come into a class, the first thing I show them is my high school transcript because I can't ever put myself in a position higher than you because I sit in a position of humility all the time. And my parents will tell you that off top. Third thing is creating a character for yourself, right? So I am a shy, quiet person. When I have to come into a conversation like this or a classroom, I know I got to give folks edutainment. I know that I'm competing with Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I know all those things are calibrated and designed to keep your attention. So I know I got to be like, I got to bring it. When I step into for a space for an interview, I'm like, all right, what's the Chris Vick experience I got to give these folks? And I write it down and I think, well, what are the actions that align with this character I'm creating? It should be an extension of yourself. It should be you turned up to 10, but all this, y'all be me, yo, keep it 100. Don't nobody want authentic you all the time. Your family, they love authentic you all the time. But in the workplace, they don't pay you to be authentic. They pay you to do a job. So being thoughtful, what's the character you're creating, and then breathing into that creation. And the last thing I'll say, and I don't believe in luck. I think luck is when opportunity meets preparation. I was fortunate enough, and my life it was changed forever by this program called IRT, Institute for Recruitment of Teachers. It is small, mighty, and one of the most powerful programs in the world. They allowed me to go to grad school for free, my doctorate close to free. My wife got her master's for free through this job. It's amazing. The program based out of Andover, Mass. It's designed to get more teachers, principally of color, in the classroom, in the guidance suites, in the psychologist's offices, in the principal's offices. They effectively will support you through at least one degree at a university that has a hard time finding more folks who look like us. It is the most ridiculously amazing program. They helped me through the GRE, my personal statement, all that stuff that I would have had no concept of how to get through the grad school application process. They helped me with all those things to say. I think it's James Clear's book, and Dr. Ruiz, I'm cribbing from Corey here. He says, it's not about your talent, it's about your systems, right? So I always encourage folks to think less about what they can do and more about what they can do consistently in establishing those systems and structures for themselves that would allow them to be successful long-term, not just for a season.
Oh, that was good. It's a lot of really good. Can you please drop the name of that program in the chat so the viewers
Yes. Oh, I am thrilled. Absolutely. Institute for Recruitment of Teachers, IRT. There's two levels. Some will do a summer intensive in Boston, but you do not have to. I didn't have to. It's great. I'll put it in the chat now.
Okay, and I wrote down, they don't pay you to be authentic, they pay you to do a job. Antoinette, I think a question came in. You're muted.
I'll go quick. So watch this. I started my career in high school at 21. My oldest students were 18. So off top, I have ridiculous imposter syndrome, right? So what did I do? I created a character, Mr. Vic, shirt and tie every day, dead fresh, suspenders when I could. I'm overcompensating. I got an accent, sound like the King of England, and I don't know why, right? So it took me 5, 6 years. And kids were like, "Yo, Vic, like I see what you're doing, and I respect you." And also, I was a black man, so I didn't really know how to, fool with it. But like, I had to create that character for myself, and over time, I can kind of loosen and become much more my authentic self, and allow students to actually like connect with me and be close with me. But for me, and I don't say because it was everybody's seasoned to taste. For me, I had to create a character, and I had to think about where am I going, what are the skills that person will have, and pretend I had them until I grew into them, and my students thankfully gave me grace as I grew those skills.
Also, you can do the job. Well, now look at you now. You're doing authentic and you're doing the job.
Ain't that something? Look at me, guys. I got
Ain't that
Jordans on.
something?
I'm out here. Authentic. 42. Old.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm gonna just say the question out loud. It's when you first began in this career, did you have doubts about your abilities, and what did you do to find confidence and overcome those doubts?
So, kind of like Chris said, we all create characters, you know. It's you fake it till you make it, to be honest. But seriously, similar experience. I was working at the jails, like I was said, or the juvenile penitentiaries, 22 years old. And at that point, we were keeping students or kids and in those settings till they were 20 and 7 months. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, some of the kids in my class, like, we could have just been hanging out in college. Like, I'm a senior, you're a junior, or so on and so forth. So we're almost the same age, but really, it takes that time and dedication. Again, just being an intentional learner, going out and seeking things of your own, things you don't know, not being afraid to ask questions, creating those mentors for yourself. And the more you do that, you start to learn more, but also you start creating this network of people that you can call or people that you can email or send a message to when you do have a question or you know where to look. And, way back in the 1900s or the early 2000s, we didn't have this thing called Google, but, everything's on the internet now. So YouTube it, research it, is ways that you can find information. Information isn't hiding. We have computers in our pockets that we carry around. We have the Jetson watches right now. So you can always get information. Information's out there. But again, just being curious about things and not being afraid to ask. So many people suffer in silence. You get these jobs and you're like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm afraid what they're going to think about me. But nobody knows what they're doing if you really want to be honest about it. We all have things that we're trying to learn, and we're all experts at some things, but if you're an expert in something, that means that you don't know a lot about something else. So that's where, be curious, ask questions.
I'd like to add on that as well. There's a couple of terms, I think, one of which the young people will be more familiar with than I think us guys were back at that age, which is the notion of growth mindset. And so I know, a lot of young people are learning about that and understanding that to what's been discussed so far, we should stay curious and realize that we're always learning and the brain is a muscle that needs to be grown. But also in terms of the question, there's a technical term called self-efficacy. And so there's a kind of a funny tension for new teachers or new folks in the education space that when you are young and naive, you do think actually that you know it all at first in a lot of cases, and you actually could be not great at all. But I think even once you maybe seeing some of that and realizing some of that, the value that you bring, despite not having the technical skills, in a lot of ways outweighs what you might be not yet expert at. And so what we've been experiencing kind of as confirmation of that in our work, because self-efficacy is actually the core of our work, is building that in new teachers. And so oftentimes, you know, we're finding that the new teachers are feeling like they should quit because they're not making the impact that they thought that they could make. And so affirming them on that, helping them develop those skills, helping them maintain that confidence is crucial to our work. And I think what should be an encouragement to any young person considering going into the profession that, you know, unfortunately, there are a lot of, you know, empty teaching positions. There are a lot of situations where some adults are so, you know, desperate to either hide the situation or just can't figure it out, that they're just, you know, kind of bringing in anybody who doesn't really have the right heart for young people. And it's actually doing harm to young people. And so if you have the heart for it, you can develop the skill for it. And so that would be my big encouragement.
Wow. We have 2 minutes left, and I feel like we just started talking. So with those, well, now 1 minute, is there anything you want to say that you think is important that we didn't cover in this session? Yay, we did good.
I would just say don't give up. Like, don't give up. Don't give up. We need teachers. We need educators. We need educators who look like us. We need educators who look like us. Our kids need educators who look like us.
Robert touched on this lightly earlier, but even though we're talking mainly about teachers and then principal, we need social workers, we need school counselors, we need a lot of other folks as well in those support positions. So even if you don't feel like you want to be standing up there teaching, there's still a lot of other possibilities for you.
Last thing I can say, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we have an option either to be giants or to pull the ladder up behind us. And the choice becomes yours.
Mic drop, right? If you guys can share your contact information in the chat, I'll hang back for a second for anyone who's watching. I'll give them a second to maybe copy that down if you're able to. So in case anything that you mentioned that really resonated with someone, they'll be able to reach out to you and maybe ask a follow-up question. And if you guys have any questions for anyone at CollegeBound, feel free to go to our website. Our information's there. You can contact me, you can contact Antoinette, or any of us will be happy to help you. Robert, Rudy, Christopher, thank you so much for your time. This has been an incredible session, and it's the last of our series of 7. We're going to pick back up next season. So thanks everyone that took the time to come and hang out with us for this hour on this rainy, probably wherever you are, rainy Wednesday. Thank you, and I'll catch up with you guys soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet you guys.
All right. See y'all soon. Amen. Absolute privilege, brothers. Thank y'all so much, man. See y'all, brothers, around.
Yes, indeed. Take care.
Yes, sir.